For those of you who are watching later, this is another one of our semi-unscheduled live streams. No one really ever knows when I'm going live because I don't ever really know when I'm going live. I just kind of do it because it amuses the hell out of me. This evening we're going to be talking about, was it too easy? Was it too easy? It might have been too easy. Shalom, Landon. How you doing, sir? And the tradesman's here. Shalom, sir. Freedom, Dad. Shalom. You know what we should... I was going to talk about, was it too easy? Maybe we should talk about reforming Torah keeping. We got so many shaloms there all at once. This has been on my mind a little bit lately. We're in need of a reference. Hey, Les is in the house. Maybe not. Maybe we'll just stick with, was it too easy? Was it too easy? Hey, y'all tell me, is it too dark? Evening, Patrick. How you doing, sir? If it's too dark, y'all let me know. I'll get some more light. I kind of like the dark, though. It's romantic. Y'all want to see my... I got my wood stove fired up, even though I don't have any pipe hooked up to it yet. Because I'm a silly, silly, silly man. All right. Was it too easy, men? I feel like it was too easy. Yeah, just a little video. It's just, you know, it's almost 50 degrees down here. It might almost be 55. I don't know. I'm cold. Hey, don't laugh at me. I don't like being cold. My Viking ancestors would laugh at me, even though my ancestors weren't Vikings. I'm as Anglo-Saxon as it gets. The Vikings were... hey, Stephen, you're not like... I'm doing good, sir. Thank you. Romantic. Yeah, no wonder I have 16 kids. You know, the Vikings were the people that my ancestors left behind. Yeah, Trump won because they were too sissy to go to England and invade England. So they stayed behind and grew up and became Vikings later. I actually don't have a very high opinion of the Vikings. As far as I can tell, they were pretty much just thieves and murderous tricksters. Initially. They got better. They got better. Big Nate has been unburdened by what has been. Jesse says it was 29 degrees up there last night. No, sir. I don't know. I guess towards the end of their run, the Vikings got a lot better. But it seems like at the beginning, like, you know, Rollo and all them, they just sound like murderous assholes. Did y'all hear that? The cow is, hey, Isaac's here. The cow got loose. When we got home, the cow was out wandering around. And I said, you know what? Enjoy your evening. So the cow is right outside the thing here. She'll probably be giving us her opinion all night long. But seriously, was it too easy? I feel like it was too easy. By the way, y'all all say a prayer for Isaac. He's still mourning. He's deeply disappointed that Kamala is not his president. You know, he's a young man, and he puts a lot of store by his DEI initiatives. And Isaac was adamant. He was adamant that it was time that we had a black woman for president. And you know, even though he knows that Kamala is not really a black woman, she was close enough, and he really wanted to break that barrier, that glass ceiling. he really hasn't accepted the truth yet, unfortunately. So y'all pray for Isaac. He screamed into his pillow and threatened to move to Canada and then backed out. But it does seem like when everything was said and done, that went way too easy. I mean, it went so easy. There were no riots. There was no drama. They said that it was going to take weeks before we found out the results, and we knew that night. I was watching the Crowder live stream, and they were calling it around. It felt like midnight. It might have been 1 or something, but it felt like around midnight already. It was getting called. There were no burst pipes. Yeah, Luke's agreeing with me. Way too easy. There were no burst pipes. There was no 3 a.m. ballot dumps. There were no surprise. The only surprise is that it wasn't that it wasn't closer than it was. I'm just suspicious. I mean, she conceded. She didn't concede that night, but I don't necessarily blame her for not conceding that night. If I ran for president and lost, which I would, if I ran for president, I would lose. I also would be a little pissy about it. Several bulldozers are getting returned now, probably. That was a funny meme. I don't know if y'all saw that meme. So I'm okay with her taking a day and just getting her mind screwed on straight before she conceded, because that would be a disappointing. That would be a hard night, you know. I mean, no one likes losing, and she lost. She lost spectacularly. I mean, she got a lower percentage of the black woman vote than Biden did. Black women liked Biden more than they liked her. I mean, that's pretty harsh. When your whole shtick is that you're a black woman, and the black women are kind of like, Joe Biden did it better. Thing's a little too close to the wall. I mean, that's a pretty resounding repudiation of a person's character there, you know. And the thing is, what's the best way to say this? You know, I consume a lot of left-wing media. I consume as much left-wing media as I do right-wing media. Maybe more. Yeah. She's got a Jamaican dad, but even her dad isn't maybe necessarily Jamaican. I've heard conflicting reports on her dad, that like he lived in Jamaica, but I've read that he might be Irish and Indian mix himself. I don't know. I didn't do the deep dive on that. It could have been one of those funny internet memes. But it's like it's possible she's like Irish and Indian, and just like her dad was from Jamaica or lived in Jamaica, and then she grew up in Canada. Why was this woman running for president of the United States even? This is nuts. We've got to get rid of birthright citizenship. They keep trying to look at, I mean, again, someone just mentioned Obama. What about that secret vote in the Senate? What about that secret vote in the Senate that Tucker Carlson started talking about? Have you heard this? I have not heard about the secret vote in the Senate, Patrick. Someone fill me in on that. Like, they keep trying to run people for president who, her dad is Irish and Hindu. This is Les. Her mom was Hindu. Judge Joe Brown knows them. See, I have questions. But they keep trying to run people for president who have tenuous connections to this country. Say what you want about Obama, even if you accept. Oh wow, Trump announced he will sign concealed carry national reciprocity today. Oh, hey, did you guys? This was on Zero Hedge. Ooh. Zero Hedge had a headline or a story about that FEMA workers were in Florida and they were sending people out to canvass neighborhoods to find out who qualified for disaster assistance. And they said like they wrote it down in an official communique or whatever to avoid houses that were that had Trump signs in the yards. Like FEMA was actively trying to not help Trump supporters in Florida. And then people in North Carolina, one of the counties that got hit really hard, said that it took FEMA 2 weeks to show up in that county. And of course, it was a county that voted 80% for Trump. I wonder what that cow is doing. I'm going to kill her and eat her here in a month or so. Now, how evil is that? Not only evil, but how stupid. They wrote it down. Okay, we all knew that that was happening. None of us are surprised that they were doing that. There are 23 people on this live stream right now. All 23 of you could have told anyone who asked that that was going on. Do any of you think that they were so arrogant and so stupid that they would write it down and blast it out in an email? It was like a group chat or something. Like it was official policy. Now, look, no. We knew it was official policy. There's only 21 of you now. 2 of you apparently did not believe all that. But how incredibly stupid do you have to be to write it down and disseminate it? How you do this? Look at me. Scruffy hillbilly talking to you from the bottom of a dirt road in a double-wide trailer. The way you do that, hey, Mike Farmer, how you doing, sir? The way you do that is that you do reverse redlining. You go to the neighborhoods where you know the Trump supporters are very unlikely to be. And then when someone asks, you just say, oh, well, we're going to what we thought were the hardest hit neighborhoods and we haven't got there yet. And then you just never go. You don't have to avoid houses with Trump signs in them. You know where the Trump supporters are. You know where they're not. You cannot be so stupid. Oh, but if you read these, now I read the whole list of, it's the same stupidity it takes to vote for Kamala. I read the whole list of rules. They were promulgated as like rules. And the last one of them was to avoid salty foods. I'm not making this up. And the last one was that coconut water is an excellent way to dehydrate and replace your electrolytes. So clearly we were dealing with a special kind of person here. I mean, typical liberal. They're passing out the work orders for the day, and the work order for the day involved uh, punish your political opponents, and drink coconut water, and avoid salty foods. This is clearly someone who does not have enough hobbies. But anywho, how stupid do you have to be to write that down? In this environment too, in an election year. And you know what? I want to say a little thank you, because apparently the people who exposed this were FEMA employees who were a part of that group chat. I love my Glock 17. And so clearly this individual name was Marnie Washington. Clearly Marnie thought she was among friends, or she would have, sure, no one is stupid enough to say that if they didn't think they were among friends. So clearly this whistleblower, the person who exposed this, was someone who was in the in-group and who crossed the ideological lines, who crossed their identity line and just exposed the truth. So this whistleblower deserves a little bit of credit. Not a little bit, a lot of credit. Because it would have been very, very easy to just roll your eyes and let that go. And like I said, because Marnie was clearly so comfortable saying these things, she thought she was among friends. So clearly this was someone who she thought would be amenable to the message. And so that person, heretics are always the most hated people. And so this whistleblower was willing to risk insulting their identity group in order to expose this truly, like, venal, is venal the right word? I think banal or banal is the wrong word. This banally evil act. I mean, it's just a banal act of evil. You guys just want to talk guns. You guys don't care about anything but guns. I just don't buy shit from Turkey. They're really good shotguns. I mean, that's the thing about something like that. That's just evil. You're going out into a community to look for people who need help because they've gotten smashed by a hurricane. Now, look, I don't think that's the federal government's job, clearly, obviously. But if you're gonna do it, if the government's gonna do it, and you're gonna tell people, oh, you can count on us. We're here. We're from the government and we're here to help, but we're not gonna help you. That's just petty evil. Petty evil. Not even like a good villainous. Say what you want about Stalin, but the guy was a great villain. Stalin was a great villain. He's just like, yeah, we're gonna kill 30 million people, and it's just what we got to do. Hey, good evening, Mark Becker. That's a guy you can. You're an evil son of a bitch, but by God, you're an honest evil son of a bitch. I have the same attitude towards strippers. Yeah, it's like, you know what, girl, you're honest. I can at least appreciate the honest. Stalin was honest. Mao was honest. Pol Pot was honest. These were truly epically evil men. These were like the villain, the laugh the whole 9 yards, world domination, remorseless psychopaths. You could write a good movie about these guys. James Bond would oppose these guys. But this Marnie Washington, this is just petty evil. It's not even like good, exciting, admirable. Okay, so here's the thing. Think about this. Yeah, a homeless guy who asked you to buy him a drink. You can appreciate that. I had a guy sell me a knife one time, and he told me that what made the knife so special is that it wouldn't stay sharp. It couldn't take an edge and it wouldn't stay sharp. And he said buffalo hunters loved it because it wouldn't nick the buffalo hides. And I mean, he didn't even blush while he was telling me this lie. And I was like, you know what? I got to buy the knife. If you can look at me and tell me that what makes the knife special is that it won't hold an edge and can't be sharpened very well, that's just the knife I have to own. So I did. I had the knife for years too. But, but, okay. So like, there's an evil. Think about, let's say Marilyn Monroe. Uh, or you know what? Let's say Marlene Dietrich. Let's think about Marlene Dietrich. If you don't know who Marlene Dietrich was, she was one of the blonde bombshells. You know, she was like a Marilyn Monroe figure before Marilyn Monroe, and kind of an interesting life, but she died in her 90s, living alone in an apartment in Paris, and she had a nephew who came to visit her a couple times a year. Never had kids. I can't remember if she ever got married or not, but kind of died in a sort of a sad life. But she'd been this movie star. She'd been this. She was a German movie star, and then she defected. Most of you probably know who Marlene Dietrich is. There's kind of a famous scene of her in a man's tuxedo. Uh, uh, and she was just like this, you know, taboo breaking movie star, and she was, you know, everyone thought she was so hot and all this 9 yards. Okay, so but she dies alone in an apartment in her 90s. She made a bargain, right? And she traded, you know, family and children and marriage and a husband for fame and fortune and glory. And she got her bargain. If you asked her at the end of her life, was it worth it? She'd probably say yes, right? She made the bargain. She got what she bargained for. Stephen's saying that's a terrible deal. Yeah, of course, you and I think it's a terrible deal, and it is a terrible deal. Mark, I think the rumor was that she was like bisexual. Anywho, it was a terrible deal, but it was the deal she made, and she got her bargain, right? You know, Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot and all these guys made a deal, and they were willing to trade their humanity for power and you know, power. Like another way to put it. And yes, they're going to burn in hell for all eternity. And yes, it was a terrible bargain. You know, what profiteth a man if he, you know, gains the whole world but loses his soul? But these guys at least bargained their souls and got what they were offered in exchange. It wasn't a good deal, but they got what they were offered in exchange. Now imagine, now think about this stupid Marnie Washington at FEMA sold her. I'm not even sure if it's a female or a male. But is this petty, evil, worthless little piece of trash, and for what? What did they get in exchange? That was a terrible bargain to sell your integrity, to sell your morality, and what did you get in return? A bureaucrat's salary that they no longer have. Allegedly, this person got fired. Who knows if they were or not? I mean, this is the government. They may have just been reassigned to a better job somewhere else. It may have been a career move. But you're going to be an evil, terrible person and get nothing in return for it, you know? Britney Spears seems like an unhappy, miserable young woman, but she is, you know, a beloved pop star. not beloved, but she is certainly a very famous, some people think they love her, pop star. She got something in exchange for what she traded. We're all pretty sure she was a she. I'm pretty sure it was a she too, but anymore these days, you just can't tell. Uh, yeah, everyone's names are so weird. And something about the coconut water, something about that, something about telling everyone to drink coconut water just is not sitting right with me. Uh, but anywho, and and this whole idea that, so this was the list. As I read the list, it looked like it was a list of things to keep yourself safe as you canvass these neighborhoods. Spears was one of the Nickelodeon kids. I'm sure she got sexualized very young. I haven't heard for sure though. Uh, uh, and of course, to stay safe, she was telling these people to avoid Trump houses because the Trumpies are going to kill you. And then that combined with the coconut water is just kind of so over the top. It just, to me, this is just screaming transgendered. But what do I know? I don't know anything. Anyway, the fact that I don't know anything will never keep me from espousing my opinion, though. Where was I? Oh, anyway, just evil with no payoff for the evil. I mean, not even selling their soul. There's some passage in this. I think it's Proverbs. It's got to be Proverbs. That it talks about the harlot who's just giving it away for free, who's not even getting paid, and how that's kind of the worst possible thing. And if you're gonna sell your soul, man, at least get to play a mean blues guitar, right? If you're gonna sell your soul, at least drive a hard bargain. At least have a good 50 years, Don't sell your soul and not even have a good time. That's absolutely stupid. I mean, don't sell your soul. Don't sell your soul. It's not worth it to sell your soul. Your soul's not worth it. But if you're gonna sell your soul, get something for it. Have a good time. Don't make a cool 80 grand and have a shit job. And I mean, if you're gonna sell your soul for power, by God, get some power. I mean, get some power. Don't be a petty FEMA bureaucrat who has to wait for hurricanes to come around to get your kicks by skipping houses. Ugh. Just pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Anywho, back to our alleged topic. It went really easy. Hey, is anyone going to tell me what this secret vote in the Senate is all about? I hadn't heard anything about it, and then someone brought it up. I'm burning cedar over here. It smells fantastic. Oh. I really like this little stove. Oh, but the stove I wanted just went on. I've been watching one on Facebook Marketplace, and they had it at $400, and they just dropped it down to $350 and cleaned it up. And it's one of those old wood cook stoves. I really want it, but I shot my wad on this parlor stove, so I'm not going to be able to go get it. But anywho, so what could they possibly? Jimmy says in Texas all he burned was cedar. Oak was a treat. Oak is a treat. Now look. Yeah, Stephen, we're going to talk about that in here in just a second. Oak, if you've got to burn, you will. If you're going to sell your soul, get something worthwhile like oak firewood. Oak is a wonderful firewood. It's heavy. It's got good BTUs. but it's pretty easy to split. Uh, it's oak, especially red oak. I have never burned blackjack oak that I know of, Luke. Uh, I have burned what something called black gum that is fireproof. And I don't, the only, I still feel like I might be crazy because I found this old log. Uh, Live oak is hard as hell. Live oak, live oak is a tough wood. Uh, I found this big old log laying down. A farmer was letting me cut firewood off his place. Uh, and I found this big old log laying on the ground, and I couldn't cut it. Like, it just wouldn't cut. I had to go buy a bigger chainsaw to cut this wood. I needed a bigger chainsaw anyway, but that chains, that log is what, anyway. And I go and I get the bigger chainsaw and I cut this wood. And it's heavy as hell. It's a big log. It was probably 2 foot. It might have been 3 foot. It was a big log. I think it was probably 3 foot. And it's hard as hell to split. It's been on the ground for a long time. Farmer says he don't remember how long it had been laying there. Like I said, hard as hell to split. That wood was fireproof. You could not burn that wood. I sold it. I was selling firewood back then. And the guy I sold it to had a gas starter on his fireplace. And he called me and he said, "You got to come get this wood. I can't burn it. I paid you good money for it. You got to come get this wood." So I went and I got the wood, gave him all new wood. I couldn't start it. This damn wood would not burn. I took it home and I had to throw it in on a piece at a time on my fires at the end of the night. And it would still be there in the morning, it was an amazing wood. I wish I could get more of it. To this day, I don't know what it was. It was fireproof. That shit was just fireproof. The farmer, when I went and I asked him about it, because I'd already cut the whole log up at that point, and I was like, "What was that log?" And he said, "Well, I don't know for sure why. He just said there was an old dead log back there." And I said, "It won't burn." And he's like, "Well, there used to be something called black gum when I was a kid." So he may have just come up with a name and thrown it out there. I have no idea if it was black gum. I think I would have recognized. The only thing I was thinking later, later on, I was thinking and I was wondering, well, could it have been black locust? But it was really big to be a black locust. I mean, black locust can get, but this was a really big tree. And I think I would have recognized it if it was black locust. And I didn't. Of course, obviously there was no leaves or anything on it. It had been on the ground for a long time. But the log was in really good shape for however long it had been on the ground. So there's a chance it was black locust. But I've never heard that black locust doesn't burn well. So I don't know what it was. But if I could find out, man, I'd build houses out of it because they would, like I said, they would be fireproof. Okay, so it went too easy, right? Oh yeah, Tim says locust burns good. It went too easy. Was it cypress? No, because it was a hardwood. Cypress looks a lot like. Cypress is more like a cedar. Oh, Bear Claw burned black locust. He says it's great, but takes forever to season. So it went too easy, right? But maybe they just shot themselves in the foot. Maybe they made such a hullabaloo last time with 2020 and January 6th and all that hyperventilating about election denying and insurrections and all this stuff, that when it came time, they just realized they didn't have a leg to stand on. Maybe they just fell in their own pit that they dug. You know? Which would be delicious. I think Stephen Cooper just mentioned it earlier. You know, they passed all these laws about how the vice president has to certify the results, which I still think is bullshit. I don't know why they would put it in the Constitution that the that the vice president is going to certify the results if there was a scenario, unless there was a scenario where he could not certify the results. Plus, we forget also, no one brought this up last time in 2020, which it pissed me off because I was screaming it back then. You know, we forget that the vice president was its own office. You know, originally, the vice president was elected separate from the president. And you could have the vice president of one, you know, who has no connection to the president. And in fact, George Washington didn't even feel like the vice president was part of his administration. There was friction between him and John Adams because John Adams was the vice president, and John Adams felt like he should be working hand in glove with the president. And Washington really had this attitude that Adams was a member of the Senate, that he was more of a member of the legislative branch. But the vice president had a role, in my opinion, originally as one of the checks and balances on the electoral process. I really think that we made a mistake when we made it was a constitutional amendment, so it is now constitutional. But it was a mistake when we changed that part of our system. The vice president being elected separately was a powerful check on the presidency, and a very important part of the accountability inside our government, and really contributed to the independence of the Senate. Yeah, lots of mistakes became amendments. But still no one's telling me about this secret vote in the Senate. I'm going to have to look it up later, I guess. No one's going to tell me what's going on with that. But anyway, so they passes these laws now that the vice president has to certify repeal the 19th. I need to print up T-shirts that say repeal the 19th. Would y'all buy T-shirts that said repeal the 19th? We'd have to make it look cool. I don't know what that would be. We need a cool logo that says repeal. Other people have done it. It wouldn't be unique. I've seen those out there before, but we could maybe do a unique take on it. Repeal the 19th. Or try to do something like we changed our mind, or it's a man's prerogative to change his mind. Repeal the 19th. Try to be clever about it. I don't know. Trying to be clever gets you in trouble. Sometimes you just need to be honest. Get a picture of one of the anti-suffragettes. Which one was the 17th? Was that the direct election of senators, Luke? I was thinking that was the 18th. But maybe it's the 17th. Anyway. No one seems. Oh yeah, Luke would be interested in a T-shirt that says "Repeal the 19th." I've wanted to do T-shirts for years. Everyone does them. All the cool kids have T-shirts. You know, Pastor Fox had that awesome Kumpf. That was a fantastic T-shirt because it was so simple, but it was always going to start conversations. Heard of Rachel Wilson? She wrote a book about the history of feminism and the anti-suffragettes. Luke says his wife would buy it for him. Yeah, it needs to be something like really insulting, though, you know? Not insulting, but like, it needs to be a really good troll. You want to, Stephen Cooper, you may have heard about this. You want to talk about feminism and witchcraft? Listen to this bullshit. This is some bullshit. All right, so there was this whole moment, this whole movement. You've all heard about it, called spiritualism back in the late 1800s, right after like the Civil War. It starts before the Civil War, but it gets really going, and it's all the seances and all this shit, and you're talking to the dead, and all of America's elites got caught up in it. Oh, I've got one of those ungovernable T-shirts also. I love that T-shirt. So the Lincolns were all caught up in spiritualism and like these seances and stuff. Who else? A lot of people. Damn Mark Twain, who was a piece of trash. Mark Twain got all caught up in it. A bunch of people. It was all of our elites back then were caught up in this mysticism, spiritualism bullshit. And that whole movement gets its start in this town in upstate New York. A little town, it's right outside a little town called Seneca Falls. Some of you may have heard of Seneca Falls. And where it starts is in this farmhouse in the kitchen at this table. It's like this round table at this farm in Seneca Falls, outside of Seneca Falls, where the very first, where it all starts with like this first seance, and it gets going there. Spiritualism. Bohemian Grove. I'm not. Anywho. A few years later, I forget how many years later, I did it again. I always do this. A few years later, the suffragettes decide they're gonna all get together and have a big meeting, and they're all gonna talk about and become feminists at this big meeting in a little town called Seneca Falls. Right? I'll look it up. It's very famous. And so all the feminists meet up at all the soon-to-be feminists meet up at Seneca Falls, and they need to draft a resolution. And so they go to a little farmhouse outside of Seneca Falls, and they draft this statement. And of course, you have to have a table to write on when you draft a statement. And to scissor themselves. And I kid you not, the table, they wrote the Seneca, I believe it's called the Seneca Falls Declaration, but I'm pulling this from memory, and I wasn't planning on talking about this, so this is just, I think it's called the Seneca Falls Declaration, and this is like the big seminal foundational moment in feminism, is the Seneca Falls Declaration, written on the exact same table that the very first seance happens on to kick off the spiritualism movement. Now, I am prone to conspiracies. I was raised in the Pentecostal movement. So I am very, very susceptible. Y'all remember, some of you may remember Clear and Present Darkness. What was that? What was that guy who? Frankie Peretti wrote a book, all about demons and spiritual warfare and all that. I grew up in that shit, and I'm still a little susceptible to it even today. And when I read that the first seance that kicked off the spiritualism movement happened on the same table that the Seneca Falls Declaration was written on. I cannot express to you, I mean, I probably could, but how important the Seneca Falls Declaration was to the feminist movement. It was the foundation of the feminist movement. It kicked all this shit off. If you did a women's studies course today, the very first thing you would learn in Women's Studies 101 is, first off, that there's no such thing as a woman. Stop being such a hateful bigot. And the very next things that you would learn is you would learn about the Seneca Falls Declaration. And that happens on the same table where the seance happens. That table, by the way, is still on display up in Seneca Falls. Tucked B, I don't know why. But that's too big of a coincidence for me. I mean, this is some QAnon shit, right? I mean, how do you explain this? But yeah, the most evil table in America. When I finally spring my my insurrection and lead all the bearded hillbillies to take over the nation, the first thing I'm doing is going to Seneca Falls and burning that table in place. We're not even going to touch it. We're not even going to risk spreading the demons. We're just going to burn it where it sits. And where I heard about that initially, soak the ashes in holy water. Oh, come on. Mariah had checked a book out about this crazy woman, a literal crazy lady. Cannot remember her name now, but it was Elizabeth something. And she was an early abortionist and part-time prostitute, sometime prostitute. She's easy to look up. Then the woman who wrote this biography was very admiring of her. This was a sycophantic biography. So this is not like a hit job on this woman's character. She ends up, she's the first woman to run for president. She was the first woman to address Congress, and she was a raging suffragette. And she was also a spirit. She did seances and stuff. So she performed abortions, she performed seances, and she was this feminist suffragette. And she was also the mistress of one of those robber barons back then, one of the big ones. And she was involved in this gold scandal where one of the robber barons, I can't remember which one it was, but you'd recognize his name if I told it to you. They were selling gold back and forth between him and these two brothers to drive up the price of gold, but they weren't actually. They were fake transactions, but they were using this woman and her sister. The sister was the mistress of one of them, and the other sister was the mistress of the other one. And these sisters were somehow go-betweens. I don't really know how it all worked. But they drove the price of gold way through the roof. And then, of course, they all sold about when it peaked and just made bukus of money, but crashed the economy. But yeah, someone said something about witchcraft and feminism earlier. That's what got me off on that tangent. And 100%, man, the early feminists and abortionists were neck deep in spiritualism and witchcraft. Just straight up, unmitigated Ouija board shit going on. These ladies would get together to talk feminism and contact the dead. And yeah, nothing's changed. There's still crazy ass religious nutbags. Just as much as they accuse us of being, Bronze Age religious nut jobs, these feminists are their religion is their vaginas. I don't really understand how it works. Somehow they worship their own plumbing. I mean, they're just psychotic. Uh, you listen to them, and it's everything about being a woman is bad. Everything about being a woman is too much. Uh, their natural processes are too much. Uh, pregnancy and motherhood is too much. Housework is too much. God, they hate housework. I am convinced that the vast swaths of the feminist movement is simply because women hate housework. Because when you hear them talk, God, they just bitch endlessly about unpaid. It's housework. They call it unpaid labor, and they call it the care economy. But what it boils down to is housework. Although they just hate housework. They're like, okay, then have a dirty house, but quit bitching. God, just shut the hell up. You don't want to clean the house, don't clean the house. They're silly, petty, vicious, mean, destructive, ugly women. Did you hear about this 4B movement? I don't. It apparently it originates in Korea, so I don't really know what 4B means. But these crazy ladies are saying that they're going to stop sleeping with men because we voted for Trump, which is a little bit unfair because more women voted for Trump this time around than did last time. Uh, and married women voted for Trump more than they voted for Kamala. It's a little unfair to blame all this on us men, although, I mean, I'm more than willing to take the credit for it. But, these crazy ladies are saying that we're going to stop having sex with men for 4 years because if we have to risk getting pregnant without having an abortion, without being able to have an abortion, then, we're just not going to have sex with these men. And of course, the women saying this are like, not women who are having sex with men anyway. It's like, my voting pattern is not why you're not sleeping with me, lady. You're not sleeping with me because you don't like men. I was watching some of these videos, on some of the liberal meltdown, because I love the liberal meltdowns. They're fantastic. But it's like, no, the problem here is not who I vote for. The problem here is that I'm not a chick. But what's funny to me is that I mean, it's not even like an original idea. There was this whole play written back in a Greek tragedy. It's a Greek comedy. It's not a tragedy, but it's a Greek play, but like ancient Greece. So we're talking like togas and shit here, called Lysistrata. Some of you probably learned about it in high school. It's where I learned about it. And the whole conceit of the play is that I think it's the Peloponnesian War. There's this big war going on between Athens and Sparta, and all the women are sick of the war, and so they've decided that they're going on a sex strike, and so all the women in Athens move into the Acropolis and take it over, and refuse to have sex with their husbands until the war ends. And of course, in that it's a comedy, it's kind of making fun of the whole thing. But it's like, this isn't even an original idea. This is, this whole trope predates Christ, for crying out loud. That play was written probably hundreds of years before Christ, walked the earth physically. But they're trotting it out here in 2024 to try to punish a bunch of married men for having voted for Donald Trump, as if that chick was ever going to sleep with me to begin with. Uh, But anywho. Oh, Les is leaving us. I'm sorry, Les. We'll miss you. Hopefully Isaac's still here, so we have a moderator in the chat. Not that you men ever need moderation or are capable of moderation. No. I also thought it was funny because the people who voted for Trump at the highest margins, the highest ratios were married men, and I don't care what kind of marriage you have. Married men get more sex than anybody. Say what you want. I've been married twice. I've been single. I've had a windows open in one of the kids. I've gone through periods in my life when my morals were not as highly refined as they are now. However highly refined you think they are. At my wildest, I never got the sex I get as a married man. You just can't. A single man who's not Elon Musk, obviously there's always the exception that proves the rule. You're just never going to get the sex you get being married. I'm sorry. A slow week. Oh, well, my poor wife. I don't want to be throwing our business out here, but you know what? It's in defense of marriage. I'm talking about a slow week. Okay, then when we say that, I won't be giving in too many details. I'm talking about I'll have a slow week every once in a while. So, like, weekly? When I was a single man out there chasing multiple hoochie mamas at once, it would pay off every couple of months, maybe at the best, or the best, at the most frequent. It wasn't weekly. It was not weekly. And every once in a while, I'd hit a hot streak, but it would be with one woman for an intense period. You were never stationed on a joint service base, huh? Stephen, I was married when I was in the Marines, for the most part. I got married about a year and a half in, I guess. But I was dating that woman for the whole time. So I didn't hit any of my wildness really till after that marriage ended, and then I lost my brains, much like I've lost my fire. So yeah, these crazy ladies are gonna punish married men by not having sex with us. And I'm just like, you know what? You weren't having sex with me anyway. And I don't even need you for sex. I mean, like, what do I need one of these crazy ladies for? I don't. They have nothing I need. I need smaller pieces of wood if they had that. Hold on a second. Don't go anywhere. I have axes on every corner of this house. This whole house is overflowing with axes until I need one, and suddenly they're nowhere to be found. It's infuriating. Anywho, so there you go, man. The next time you go to try to hook up with a fat lesbian, she's probably going to tell you no, and it's going to be because you voted for. Yeah, I know, Stephen. I always have multiple hatchets within arm's reach. Suddenly, I need one, and they're nowhere to be found. But yeah, the next time you can't hook up with a fat lesbian, don't get mad at her. Understand it's your voting habits that are the problem. She tried to warn you. If it wasn't for how you voted, she would have slept with you, but you went and voted for Trump. And these people think they should have the right to vote. Think about this. This is the kind of logic. And you know what? If it was a troll, it would be funny. You know, if it was just a troll, it would be funny. And I'm sure with a couple of them it is a troll. But the ones I was watching, tears, just over the top emoting, screaming at the camera, like axe rack. I do need an axe rack. I don't know. It's apparently Tim Pack said something about an axe rack, and I need one. Hey, Mark. I mean, this was like real to them. Like, I'm not sleeping with you. I'm not going. And of course, you know what? I got news for some of these women. The instant some Chad they found desirable shows them some attention, not only will they be sleeping with him, they will be in love with him. All right, let's stop playing this whole women don't need men stupid game, or don't care about men. This whole men are a luxury. I don't need no man. Bullshit. I'm sure there's women that need them less than others. But I mean, that's the whole curse. Your desire will be for a husband. Or your desire will be to have a master. Your desire will be for a man. And just research after research, statistic after statistic after statistics that says that women, they're in their natural state delusion. That women desire to be permanently pair bonded with a man. It is a strong, strong drive among women. Now, it's been twisted here as of late, and they have a strong desire to be pair bonded with the best man they can be. That's that whole hypergamy. This is really hard to do with a claw hammer. That whole hypergamy bullshit is real, and actually, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't have any problem with hypergamy. I am fine with the idea that a woman wants to be with a man who is the best possible at providing resources. That to me that is not anything to be ashamed of, or to be like to have to try to explain away. Now, I do think it's a mistake to. So the things that women find attractive in men are very, very, very difficult to verify, right? You know, what women actually end up finding attractive in a man is he capable of protecting? Is he capable of acquiring, accumulating resources? Is he capable of forming alliances? Can a man do all of the things that are going to make a woman and her children secure and safe? And those are Those are positive attributes to look for in a man. And women should look for those things in a man. The problem is they're very, very difficult things to be able to judge. And so you have to find proxies for them, right? And this is not, almost no idea is original to me. I've heard this other places. And so can, wealth is the most obvious proxy for those attributes, you know, to be able to protect, to be able to acquire resources and form alliances, and provide leadership and stability. All those are very hard things to quantify, especially when you're looking at a young man, right? And when you're a young woman, it's very hard for a young woman to be able to and this is why arranged marriage are such a good idea. These are not easy things to figure out and to quantify, and maybe it doesn't make sense, but it's understandable when women look at things like cars and jewelry and flash and the, you know, the appearance of wealth, because men who have those attributes, men who can accumulate resources and provide protection and form alliances, these are men who will eventually be successful on some level. They will acquire wealth on some level. They will have those accoutrements. So it's not crazy to me when, you know, women are attracted to men with resources. It makes perfect sense. Now, someone said something about the trading up thing, right? And the downside is that they never want to choose. You know, they never want to get stuck with their choice, which is scary. I mean, I go, oh gosh, man, we just lost 10 people all at once. Man, who did I insult? Holy shit. There were some red pill guys on here who just absolutely rejected everything I just had to say. We were at 37 people, and then I look up, we're at 27. Them red pill boys ain't got no sense of humor. You MGTOW guys, you got to get a thicker skin. They just said, nope. That was too revolting for me. But yeah, no, they've got to be willing to live with that choice once they make it. And I think, did I burn a bridge to Simpville? And that's the problem with the women who are constantly trading up. They're not willing to accept, you know, there's checks and balances on everything. And once a decision's made, you need to stick to it. And that's what the modern woman's not willing to do. I'm completely okay with her choosing the man best able to provide resources. The problem comes in when she's not willing to then commit to that choice and stick to it. Mark says it's called monkey branching. What is monkey branching? I've never heard this term before. Maybe the MGTOW guy stayed. Maybe it was the chicks who ran. Maybe we lost all the women in the chat. Someone explain monkey branching to me. Oh, what you just explained. So monkey branching is when they don't stay, they don't keep the commitment they made, and they just jump up to the guy who can provide the next best resources. Okay. I love Firewood. And hell, let's not just preach at the ladies. Very frequently, us men are also, you know, we're going to sleep with a chick and then, you know, not take up our responsibilities, because I'm sorry, man, if you break it, you bought it. We shouldn't be, and I'm talking to the choir here. Y'all know I'm not going out on any limbs by making this statement to this group of men. If we're going to go sticking our dicks in a woman, then we need to be responsible for that relationship. I am of the firm opinion that every time you have sex, that you have either formed a one flesh relationship you are then responsible for, or you've committed adultery, and you need to accept the consequences for your adultery. That is not a popular opinion even among my fellow believers, but I can back it up scripturally. Sex is an incredibly powerful act. There's people talk about the marriage covenant all the time. Well, I defy you to find me a description or an explanation of the marriage covenant in Scripture. It's not in there. Or it actually is in there. And the marriage covenant is sex. And again, I can make that argument from Scripture too, that when you have sex with a woman, you have either married her or you have committed adultery with her. There is no such thing as sex before marriage. And what we should be teaching all these dumbass kids in the church is not, if you're having sex with your girlfriend, stop it. Stop sinning. You're not sinning when you form a one flesh relationship. He who finds a wife finds a good thing. You're sinning when you break the one flesh relationship. It's never sinful to form a valid one flesh relationship. It is sinful to break the one flesh relationship, i.e. divorce, what we frequently call divorce or putting away. But that's exactly what we do when we tell people, you stop sinning, you sinner, stop sleeping together, you got to break up. And I've heard good, well-meaning Christians give that advice all the time. How dare you be sleeping with your girlfriend? Well, if you're sleeping with her, she's not your girlfriend, jackass. All right? You've just formed a one flesh relationship. Maybe it was a very, very poorly thought out one flesh relationship. Maybe it was an incredibly ill-advised one flesh relationship. But you're married, young man. Although, the other thing you don't find in Scripture is people hate it when I say this. Marriage, what we call marriage isn't in the Bible. There's no word for it. Mostly, there is a word that frequently gets translated marriage, and it's around describing things like the marriage bed and the marriage supper. But when the Bible talks about a couple who's married, it never uses even the word husband and wife or that they were married. It always uses the term man and woman or master. It's got some pretty strong connotations that we don't like in our modern world. we're like, no, you hateful misogynist. Well, maybe, but all I can go by is what it says. I can't add to the text, and I can't take away from the text. And the text doesn't tell me all this stuff that we've built up around marriage. The government has no role in marriage. As far as I can tell, the church has no role in marriage, except for, well, I can't see that the church has any role in marriage. This is a civil contract between people, an enforceable civil contract. So, Mark, I'm not okay with tradition. I'll never, ever, ever, ever rely on tradition. I shouldn't say never ever. I will almost never ever rely on tradition. And if someone tells me it's tradition, then I'm going to reject it. And I'm only going to rely on the text. And that's not as hard as you'd think. People, when I tell them that, will start asking me things. Well, what about this and what about that? And then how you can't do that because then you won't resolve this issue. And my response is always, if it's not in the text, it's not an issue. Where there's no law, there's no transgression, or where there's no law, no sin is imputed. If it's not in the text, then we don't have to have an answer. Oh, okay, Mark. I'm sorry. That's funny. I always enjoy tweaking the Catholics. I will never go. You will never go wrong with me making fun of Catholics. If you're Catholic in the chat, I love you, brother. I'll see you in heaven. And when I do, you're gonna be really embarrassed. That's all I got to say about that. Yes, you'll most likely be there. No, you won't be in one of the bigger houses. You're going to be down there next to the Mormon section, and you can all be a little embarrassed together. I listen to this Catholic podcast. It's a really good podcast. I Confession Hour of Power. With Father Duncan, with Father Revolting. I tend to enjoy consuming media that I disagree with. If I agree with you, I don't probably enjoy you that much. That's not true. But I don't consume a lot of media I agree with because I already know that stuff. I already believe it. I already agree with it. It's all stuff I've hashed out before. It's not as mentally engaging as things I disagree with. So I listen to well done. Wow, good job, Stephen. Damn, Stephen Cooper's on it. Pints with Aquinas. Jimmy's, I'm Mormon and I will get my own planet, folks. Well, I mean, good on you. Yeah, I listen to Pints with Aquinas. I listen to about half of Pints with a vulgar display of truth. About half of everything he puts out. This guy's name's Matt Fradd. And he's actually a really, really good, he's really good podcaster. I mean, he's a good presenter. I enjoy his show. If he had a show about anything, it would probably be good because he's good at it. But man, they talk about the things they believe. And I'm just like, you guys are batshit crazy. What the hell? Where did this, what? He had this priest on there one time. I am convinced celibacy, in the vast majority of cases, celibacy is a sign of deep-seated mental illness. And in this particular instance, he's got this priest on who clearly has an unhealthy relationship to food. This guy's not okay. Like, he is not okay. And he gets off on, of course they love the Eucharist, the communion, which I really struggle with because, they say that, the whole transubstantiation thing where they say the bread and the wine turn into the real blood and the real flesh of Christ. So that when you take communion, their communion, they control it. That you're literally consuming the blood and body of Christ. It's real blood, it's real body. And of course, we're told very specifically in Acts 15 that we're not to consume blood or anything with blood in it. And so, yes, this is a little bit of a semantic troll, but that's okay. I'm okay with semantic trolls. so like their vision of their conception of communion and the so-called Eucharist is literally against Scripture. But this guy is talking about the Eucharist. I'm going to use his terminology. Damn, we lost the Catholics too. Holy shit. We just dropped down again from 33 to 26. I didn't know we had that many Catholics in the chat. But so this priest is going on and on about, I'm going to get this a little wrong. I don't remember it now. How it was so meaningful. Mark, I didn't know you were Catholic. Are you pulling my leg, or are you really Catholic? Like I said, I believe our Catholic brethren are saved. I believe they meet the standard. Confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, and you shall be saved. But I do not understand Catholic theology at all. And this priest was going on and on about how, and he was in this sort of this ecstatic state, telling you, in you'd have to hear it. Trad Catholic. Well, if you're going to be Catholic, Mark, Trad Catholic's the way to go. Although I think if I just absolutely had to be Catholic, I think I would be an Eastern Catholic. But he was, oh God, we dropped down to 22. People do not like this. He was going on and on about how when you take the Eucharist, you are eating, how do you say it? You are eating the bread of the oven of Mary's womb. And it was very, very, what's the right word? It was almost, it was sensual. It was sensual. Now the Catholics got this whole theology of the body, and so they're in a phase right now where they're much more comfortable. It was very odd wording, Mark, and the way he delivered it was even more odd, because he was in this sort of, he really did sound ecstatic as he was talking, and I've never heard him on there again. So maybe he even freaked out Matt Fradd a little bit. Ow, hot. The red parts are hot. But it wasn't healthy. Yeah, it wasn't coming from a healthy. And I hear, you know what, Mark, I don't want to just, you know what, if I'd have known you were Catholic, I probably would have gone about that a little bit different. I do believe, Catholics are Christian brethren. But I do, they had to come out of some seminary to be that screwed up. Yeah, and it doesn't matter what Catholic seminary, Assemblies of God, all seminaries, period, just, whack jobs. There's other problems I have. I just don't like being rude to people, especially not sincere, thoughtful people. If you're an asshole, yeah, I'll be rude to you. But Mark has been with us forever, and he's proven himself time and time again to be a thoughtful, fair-minded. It was I think it was something like the fruit of the bread of the oven of Mary's womb. It was a really weird, anyway. But I have some other struggles with Catholicism. Stephen says it came out more contemplative. So maybe he heard this. Maybe he knows what I'm talking about. Stephen, if you heard what I'm saying and you don't think I'm being fair, sound off. Tell us what you heard. Or maybe you were talking about something else. But this jackass just rubbed soot all over my face. Oh, not the priest, you. Uh, you know, we're told that the fruit of the loom. We're told that the qualifications for being a bishop include having a wife. And obviously we know like Catholic bishops are not allowed to have a wife. I can't reconcile that. Uh, what else can I? There's some other things I can't reconcile. Obviously, like anyone raised Protestant, I'm deeply uncomfortable with most of the Marian dogmas. Uh, I let my cigar go out again. Although I will say this, you guys got a really good, when you go to the Revelation and the woman and the dragon, that's an interesting passage, the way Catholics tie that to Mary. I don't have it's not convincing to me, but I don't have a response for it. But when you talk about Mary being sinless, obviously I can't go along with that because Scripture says that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. None is righteous, no, not one. All right, and Mary would be one. And I can't reconcile Mary being sinless with the Scriptures that tell us that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. There's no carve out in that for Mary. So I have a very, very, very hard time with the Marian dogmas. And then I have a problem with the primacy of Rome. I was raised Protestant, and technically I probably still am Protestant, even though I'm a Torah keeper. Hail Mary prayer is word for word Luke. I would have to see that, Mark. I'm not familiar with that. Is that hail? That's when the angel greets her and is telling her that she's about to carry Christ, right? Because the rosary sounds very, very different than that to me. I would have to see that explained in a little more detail. Hail Mary, blessed are you among women. That doesn't end right there. Or the rosary doesn't end right there. I mean, plus we're told how to pray. Jesus told us how to pray, and he said, Our Father who art in heaven. It didn't say anything about praying to anyone other than God the Father. In fact, my understanding right now, and I'm open to being told I was wrong on this part, is that we shouldn't even pray to Jesus. That we should pray to God the Father, not God the Son. So that would be another objection I would have too. But then the Marian dogmas just start getting they start getting out of hand pretty quick, because now suddenly Mary has a role in salvation, and it on an individual level. So like each one of us, she has a role in each of our individual salvations. Not that she just had a role in the overall plan of salvation, but what really, and like there was never a time when I was, like open to Catholicism. So when I say this, take it with a grain of salt. Because I was raised by two ex-Catholics, two former Catholics who who are very skeptical of Catholicism, although they have returned to something kind of surprisingly similar in their old age. They've gone to Anglicanism, interestingly enough. But so now Mary has to have. Hey, Mark. Good evening, bud. So now Mary, because she has to be sinless, also they had to give her a virgin birth. Now, I don't. Well, anyway. But the problem was that wasn't good enough. So now Mary's mother has also had, they've discovered a virgin birth for Mary's mother. And now my understanding is that this is dogma. And now, Mark, tell me if I'm mistaken on this, but my understanding is that it is dogma, which for a Catholic means that it's something they're required to accept. That Mary's mother also had a virgin birth. Well, that's a different Mark Vulgar. Mark Chase had to leave. Mark Becker is our Catholic friend who I'm talking to right now. And my question is, why would that matter? So if Mary had to have a virgin birth in order to be sinless, and then Mary's mother had to have a virgin birth in order that Mary's would be sinless, why doesn't it keep going? Why doesn't Mary's grandmother have to have a virgin birth? It seems like if now, and this is a misunderstanding of sin and sin nature too, by the way. This is another indictment of Catholic theology, in my opinion. You know, sin is passed down through the Father. It's through Adam that sin entered the world, not through Eve. And sin gets passed through the Father, not the Mother. So I don't understand why Mary having a virgin birth would save her from getting whatever sin was passed down from her through her maternal line. Right, because Jesus didn't have a father, right? He didn't have an earthly father. Adam wasn't in his line. All men inherit our sin through Adam. So I don't understand why Mary and Mary's mother would need to have virgin births in order for Mary to not have sin. But that's a little bit of an aside thing. So anywho. Well, like I said, it's not fair for me to be beaten up on Catholicism. See, that is one thing to make a few jokes. Now, I'm okay making a few jokes. I make jokes about Torah keepers, too. In fact, one of my topics I almost did tonight was talking about the Reformation that is needed among Torah keepers, because we're getting a little off track in our movement. I've seen some apostasies and some people denying Christ lately, and there's been some concerning developments among Torah keepers. And a very concerning development in that my cigar is out and my matches, I'm out of matches. I wonder if my beautiful wife is watching the live stream or if she's gone to sleep. If my beautiful wife is watching the live stream, please bring me some matches, dear. If not, I'll find something. But I was going to say, the primacy of Rome is another vulgar display of truth. This is just a second. I buy these in blocks of 20 for $40. They're really, really good for a $2 cigar. I enjoy them a lot. But I keep talking too much. So there's nothing in Scripture about, Rome being primary. So there's nothing in Scripture about the Bishop of Rome having precedence over all other bishops. In fact, there's nothing in Scripture about there being a Bishop of Rome. And so what the Catholics will tell us is that, well, it's tradition, and they say that tradition can rise to the level of Scripture in certain instances. But the tradition was not, I mean, we know what the tradition was in the early church, and it was not that Rome took precedent. There was a council of 5 cities, of 5 bishops. It was Rome, Antioch, Jerusalem, Constantinople, and Alexandria. And those 5 bishops were all equal, allegedly. Aren't children born without sin after Jesus died for our sins? No. Children are still born with sins. We just have the ability to have those sins absolved. So the earliest tradition we know wasn't even that Rome was primary. Rome was co-equal with 4 other cities. The Bishop of Rome was co-equal with the bishops of 4 other regions. We say cities, but they were really regions. So even the argument from a traditional standpoint, to me, doesn't hold up, because we know that's not what the tradition was. The earliest tradition was 5 co-equal bishops. And I have heard people say, well, that tradition changed after the Muslim invasions and takeovers. But the problem with that is that Constantinople didn't fall until like the 1450s. I may have that a little wrong, but it's something like that. 1430s, 1450s, somewhere in there. And that was long after the split between Constantinople and Rome, and long after Rome started claiming to have primacy. So the whole idea of the Pope being the head of the church falls apart for me. And the scripture they rely on is not convincing. Where Christ is talking to Peter after the resurrection, and he says, "On this rock I will build my church." That just doesn't hold water. There's too many other things that could mean. 2 other things much more likely. The whole idea of the Pope is so central to Catholic theology that why wouldn't God tell us this? Why wouldn't God have put this in his scripture? Hey, everybody, there's going to be a Pope. You need to obey him and listen to what he says, because of how central it is. Hey, Lance Corporal Veteran. At the moment, we're talking about my problems with Catholic theology, so we're maybe not being incredibly entertaining. I'll get him some good red sulfur tip matches dipped in natural wax. You won't light with anything else. Yeah, that sounds like they're pretty cool. Okay, but again. Yeah, but so that's a little bit of a bait and switch, though, Mark, because the Pope isn't just the successor of Peter. The Pope has the ability to promulgate teachings that carry the weight of Scripture. What me as a Protestant would describe as carrying the weight of Scripture. The Pope has the ability to dictate non-negotiable dogma, like adding the Marian dogmas, like we were just talking about. Remember, the Marian dogmas get added very late. They're only a couple hundred years old. They're based on when they became dogmas. Was just like in the last 200 or 300 years, some nuns started having some visions, and a lot of this stuff came out of some ecstatic experiences, some charismatic. Thank you, Tuckby. Appreciate you hanging out with us, brother. Some nuns were having, which is problematic for me as well. but the Pope in Catholicism has the ability. Look at there. My poker stick turned into a match. Oh my God, you idiot. It's puffed on the wrong end. I'm clearly not the one to be criticizing anyone's theology. And you say, well, the Pope's just the successor of Peter, but we actually don't have any scriptural evidence that Peter was ever even in Rome. Now, I mean, I accept that he probably was. I mean, there's strong tradition that he was in Rome, and it doesn't bother me that he was or wasn't in Rome. But we don't have any scriptural evidence that he was ever the Bishop of Rome, or that if he was the Bishop of Rome, that the Bishop of Rome would be anything more than the Bishop of Rome, or that the title was hereditary, or that the Bishop of Rome would have any more importance than the Bishop of Milan or the Bishop of Ravenna or any of these others. So even if you allow that the Pope is just the successor of Peter, then you got to prove that Peter was the Bishop of Rome. Then you got to prove that the Bishop of Rome has primacy over the entire church. And then you have to prove that the Bishop of Rome can promulgate new dogmas. And none of that is clear to me in any step of the way. And there's some other things I struggle with. Hey, we lost Tim too. All right, good night, Tim. Thank you, sir. But those are a lot of the biggest. Oh, I do have some more. This is something we should talk about anyway. Masturbation. Dun, dun, dun. Let's talk about masturbation. And I don't have this scripture in front of me, but it's Leviticus, somewhere in Leviticus, and it's probably right around 18 somewhere. It seems to be where a lot of these things are at. So the Catholic Church teaches that masturbation is a mortal sin, that you will go to hell for the sin of masturbation. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong here. I might be being hyperbolic, but that's my understanding. Masturbation is a mortal sin. If you masturbate, you're not. I think you're capable of forgiveness, but you're not capable of salvation while you're in a state of. I'm very sure about. So anyway, the thing is. A vulgar display of truth. Well, shit. Scripture has a very, very clear teaching on masturbation, and many people don't know this. And there's a whole explanation you have to go into about why. Now, this is an Old Testament teaching, and so yes, there is a whole explanation that has to be made. Well, it's not lusting. I mean, it's masturbation. We're dealing with masturbation. The sin of masturbation in the Catholic Church is a mortal sin. Okay, so this whole wasting of seed thing here is not scriptural. What Scripture says about masturbation is that if a man spills his seed on the ground, now hear me out. You're about to say something, and I love you, man, but you're mistaken. And so I need you to just listen to me. It's going to take 2 minutes, and I will deal with your caveat. The Old Testament tells us very, very clearly that when a man spills his seed on the ground, he's to wash himself with water, and he's unclean until evening. Okay? So now that makes it sound like masturbation is a sin. Unfortunately, that verse follows immediately on the heels of a verse that says when a man sleeps with his wife, when a man has sex with his wife, he's to wash with water, and he's to be unclean until evening. So unless you're willing to say that having sex with your wife is a mortal sin, you can't say that masturbation is a mortal sin. Now you're going to say Onan, O-N-A-N. And you all actually know this story. Onan was Onan was a young man who was the son of Judah, one of the sons of Judah. Judah had a son who married a woman named Tamar. That son died without giving him an heir. So under Jewish tradition at the time, it wasn't a law yet. It was no, I'm sorry, not Jewish. Under Israelite tradition at the time, the next brother in line had to marry the woman and raise up an heir for his brother. And Onan was the next brother in line. And Onan didn't want to raise up an heir for his brother, so when he had sex with his brother's with Tamar, rather than impregnate her, he spilled his seed on the ground so she wouldn't get pregnant. And God killed him. But God didn't kill him because he spilled his seed on the ground. It's very, very clear in the text. The text says this explicitly. God killed him because he refused to raise up an heir for his brother. All right? So that is the story of Onan is not a story about spilling the seed on the ground. It's the story. There's some reasons, some speculation. We can get into it all if you're interested, but it's not about spilling your seed on the ground. There's a very, very clear biblical law about masturbation, and it is simply that it's not that big a deal. It doesn't. It has no more impact than having sex with your wife. Having sex with your wife, by the way, is a command. Like if having to wash with water and be unclean till evening is a sign of a sinful state, you're commanded to sin because we are commanded to have sex with our wives. We are not allowed to deny our wives in sex. So for me, that teaching on masturbation is a direct contradiction in Catholic teaching against Scripture. You cannot square teaching that masturbation is a mortal sin with what the text has to say about masturbation. Now, Mark brought up an interesting point. He says, no, well, it's not about the masturbation, it's about the lust. Okay, but it's not I'm using that word a lot tonight. It's not promulgated that way in the Catholic teaching I've listened to. They all talk about the masturbation aspect. But the Old Testament, at least, the Old Testament sexual laws, and this law is a direct law given right in the middle of all the other sexual laws about who you can and can't sleep with and adultery and all this stuff. This isn't like a story. This isn't like, description versus prescription. This is clearly a prescribed moral statute. If a man spills his seed on the ground, he's to wash with water and he's unclean till evening. And it's the next verse. If Isaac is still with Isaac, if you're still with us, would you mind looking up those two verses for me? They won't be hard to find. They're in Leviticus. And it's immediately after the one about when you sleep with your wife. And the only thing that results from being unclean till evening is that you can't go to the temple, or in that case, the tabernacle. The temple wasn't a thing yet. It was the tabernacle time. So this is an area where Catholic dogma, for me, completely contradicts Scripture. Now, Marcus is talking a little bit about lust and pornography, and we don't understand lust. Lust, this is a hard one because this is so ingrained in our minds, and this is what happens when we allow the teachings of men to take on a life of their own. Lust is not a sin. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. There's specific lust. Lust just means desire. Look up the word. It's just desire. And in fact, at various times, righteous people are described as lusting righteously. I don't have any of the examples in front of me. I wasn't ready for this. But just because someone lusts doesn't mean they're sinning. It's when they're lusting after something that's forbidden to them, when they're coveting, they're being covetous. Now, the counter to that is people will come back with Matthew 5. I believe it's Matthew 5, 27 and 28. I might have that wrong, but it's close. And this is Christ teaching, and he says something. This is a paraphrase. Like I said, I wasn't prepared for this tonight. He says something along the lines of, okay, Basshole, stick with me for just 1 second, and I will tell you why in this instance that's not true. But it's an excellent point. But there's a counter argument to that. Christ says something like, "You have heard it said, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say to you, if you look on a woman with lust, you have already committed adultery with her in your heart." And that's the response. And people will say, well, Jesus made a new law, or he I got this damn soot all over me, or he strengthen's not the right word, made more strict an existing law. Okay, but here's the problem. Read what that verse actually says. That passage actually says. It says, when a man, and it's very clear, it's a man. It's not like, universal men, mankind. When a man lusts after a woman. So even if we took the verse at face value, now the actual meaning there is married woman. Christ actually identifies it when he says he's talking about adultery. Adultery is the sin of sexual relations with another man's wife. The adultery is always dictated by the marital status of the woman, not the man. So Christ is talking about a married woman here. When you have heard it said, thou shalt not commit adultery. You shall not have sexual relations with another man's wife. Christ is saying, even if you desire to have sex with another man's wife, you're still committing adultery. But let's just say that the other interpretation is right, and it's saying that you're not allowed to lust after any woman. It still is saying that men are not allowed to lust after women. So that verse, applied that way, would allow men to lust after men, and it would allow women to lust after everybody. Okay, this verse cannot be applied that way because it is not a well-ordered, and Mark will know why I'm using that word. It is not a well-ordered moral standard. All right, it allows homosexual lust by the men, and it allows complete and total lust by women. Okay, so that cannot be the answer for that passage. That can't be what I did it again. God, I'm so stupid. Oh, no, it's still good. The passage is incoherent unless it is talking about what Christ said he was talking about. Because remember, he says it at the beginning of the passage. You have heard it said, thou shalt not commit adultery. We know the definition of adultery. It is not under dispute. I mean, you can dispute it, but you'll lose. And that's what Christ is talking about in Romans 5, 27 and 28. Okay, now Basshole, I hope you stuck with us because you bring up a point we hear a lot, and you say, we don't live in the Old Testament anymore, we live in the New Testament. Okay, fantastic. Now we've got to deal with a few things though. So your entire sexual ethic has to be found in the New Testament then. All right? And I will wait. We can take a minute and wait for you to go to the New Testament and find the sexual laws laid out in the New Testament. And you're going to think they're there, and you're going to go looking for them, and you're not going to find them. And let me tell you specifically what you're not going to find. You will not find any New Testament prohibitions on either incest or bestiality. If your entire sexual ethic is based wholly in the New Testament, then you are free to sleep with any family members and any animals you so desire. And I do not believe that you believe that. But I can go a step farther here, and we're going to go to Acts chapter 15. This is the famous Council of Jerusalem. This is the passage that not everyone, This is the main passage where people go to say that we're not living in the Old Testament anymore, that we're under a new system. And there's some truth to that. In the Council of Jerusalem, in Acts chapter 15, they lay out the rules that believers have to meet in order to be members in good standing of the ecclesia, of the assembly, of what we call the church in English. Is it not a condition of the heart and dependent on the circumstances? Hey, Jason, I would probably dispute that statement, but we would have to talk about it more to make sure we were using the same terminology. So at the Council of Jerusalem, we get these rules laid out, and there are, in order to be a member in good standing of the ecclesia, you have to not eat blood or things sacrificed to idols or things with the blood in them. So there's actually still some dietary laws in the New Testament, men. I want you all to think hard on that. You have to remember the widows and orphans, and you have to abstain from fornication. So these are the only rules laid out in Acts chapter 15 for us to be members in good standing of the ecclesia. We cannot reject a fellow believer who meets those standards. Now, traditionally, no. You'd have to tell me what's according to tradition, Mark. I'm not sure what you mean. What are you saying is according to tradition? Because I will not allow anything to be according to tradition. Okay, so now we've got this interesting statement that we're to abstain from fornication, right? What's fornication? Well, we all know what fornication is. Fornication is when you have sex outside of marriage. Now, I grew up in the South, a lot of Southern Baptists, so when I make fun of religious elites, I'm usually making fun of Southern Baptists. And I usually do it in a NASCAR, but you've got to abstain from fornication. You can't be having that sex before marriage. But if fornication in Acts chapter 15 means sex before marriage, which it doesn't because there's no such thing as sex before marriage, then let's think about the things that are allowed in the church. Anything other than sex before marriage is allowed in the church. Incest, bestiality, homosexuality, adultery. Adultery would be allowed in the church if fornication means sex before marriage. Now, none of you within the sound of my voice right now are willing to admit that. None of you are going to say that we have to accept people as members in good standing of the church who practice homosexuality, who practice bestiality, or in an incestuous relationship. You would not. So what do you do with Acts chapter 15? Vulgar display of truth is very, very close to the truth here. Fornication, the word that gets translated fornication, this is throughout the New Testament text, by the way. Is the Greek word porneia. In English, it gets transliterated in English as Porneia, porneia. You might recognize that. It's where we get our word pornography from. All right. Porneia is a very, very easily defined Greek word. All Greek words are easily defined. God did us a wonderful gift when he translated his scriptures into Greek. And cemented the meaning of Greek. One of his great underappreciated miracles. Porneia means prohibited sexual acts. That's what it means. It means sexual impurity. All right. Now we have to go find a list of prohibited sexual acts. I'm talking to Basshole. Remember, Basshole said that we're living in a New Testament environment, and he is right. We are living in a New Testament environment. However, in Acts chapter 15, with the use of the word porneia, the New Testament brings whole. without alteration, it brings forward all of the Old Testament sexual laws. It brings them forward from the Old Testament. It pulls them straight out of Leviticus, and it plants them firmly in Acts chapter 15 in the New Testament. Porneia, the prohibited sexual acts, the sexual immorality that is being prohibited in Acts chapter 15 has to be the Old Testament sexual laws. There's no other way. There's no other list we can come up with. There's no list in the New Testament of prohibited sexual acts. None whatsoever. You can't, I shouldn't say, I'm sorry. There are categories of prohibited sexual acts in the New Testament. Now, understand what I'm saying here. Let me puff on this before it goes out on me again. Sexual immorality is prohibited throughout the New Testament, but it is prohibited generally. It is never defined specifically. The only place sexual acts are prohibited specifically is in the Old Testament, around Leviticus 18. Okay? So we bring all of those lists of prohibited sexual acts and sexual laws forward. Hey, congratulations, Luke. His 13-month-old just said her first sentence. Cool, what did she say? I hope to God it was not prohibited sexual acts. If I made your poor 13-month-old daughter's first sentence to be prohibited sexual acts, then I apologize. It's a ball, yay! So, now from Mark's standpoint, that brings forward the law about masturbation. Okay, so that's why that's why this is important from Mark's standpoint. That if Acts chapter 15 means anything, it means that the Old Testament sexual laws come forward, which means the law around masturbation in Leviticus, I believe it's 18, but I'm not sure. I guess Isaac's gone because he hasn't spoken up. I'll text him later. So now we have a New Testament passage referencing an Old Testament law that would directly contradict Catholic teaching on sexual morality. And that's also the answer to Basshole, which is a great name, by the way. I wish I'd thought of that first. Bassholes, and Basshole, if you're still with us, pipe up, and I'm sure you have a response to this. I'd love to hear it. You know, Basshole's objection that, well, we don't live in the Old Testament time, and he's... Good night, Lance Corporal Veteran. Sorry we bored you, sir. We appreciate you popping in on us. That we don't live in the Old Testament. We don't live in the Old Testament. We live in a New Testament world. A lot of my Torah observant brethren hate me when I say this, but we cannot deny that some things changed with Christ. But what did not change was any of the sexual laws. Now that is... Damn it. That is a revolting idea to a lot of people. That is a truly revolutionary idea. If we're bringing forward all of the Old Testament sexual laws, that leaves us as modern day Western Christians with some very, very difficult questions to answer. But Acts chapter 15 is a very difficult passage. Not that it's hard to understand. It's very hard. It's very easy to understand, but it can be very difficult for us to reconcile our Western sexual mores to the Old Testament sexual mores. But look, God does not... so Jason is telling us 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11. I do not have a Bible in front of me. Normally I would look it up on my phone, but currently I'm talking to you on my phone, so I won't be able to look up. If someone can give us a quick paraphrase or recap or even quote us 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, I would appreciate it, and we can deal with this. If this is the Jason Johnson I'm thinking of, it's well worth hearing him out, because he is also a thoughtful, learned man. Although I've never seen that particular Jason Johnson use that name. Usually he's going by a different name, so I'm not 100% sure it's him. See if I can do this without burning my beard. I don't know if I can. And I don't have any other explanation for it. I refuse to say that teenagers who have sex, these two teenage high schoolers who have sex with their boyfriends and girlfriends are thrown out of the church, but bestiality is allowed in the church. You won't make, it's a ridiculous honest statement. It's almost an unfair thing for me to bring up, because there's no response to that. You can't come and say, well, no, fornication is there's no other. God, I got this soot all over my face. I look like one of the poorhouse kids from Oliver. Please, sir, might I have some more? There's just no other explanation. So, again, that's just another one of my objections to Catholic theology and Catholic teaching, is I can't square it with even what the New Testament says, let alone what the Old Testament says. And of course, in this particular instance, the New Testament is repeating what the Old Testament says. So that's a little bit of an unfair characterization. I can't square it with the moral. Hey, Buddy Bear's here. He's telling it, or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality. Okay, so I probably should have known that was where we were going. So it's a good verse. Obviously, it's scripture. I love it, Jason Johnson. But what's not in there? Is that the totality of the list of your sexual laws? Because it talks about the sexually immoral. It doesn't say any and adulterers and men who practice homosexuality. What's not in there? Well, lesbianism isn't in there. It's specific. It says men who practice homosexuality. Incest isn't in there. Bestiality isn't in there. This verse proves my point. We have, again, an incomplete listing of sexual laws. If that is the totality of your sexual ethic, then your sexual ethic is not good enough. Your sexual ethic allows bestiality. Your sexual ethic allows incest. Your sexual ethic allows lesbianism. And if that's your stance, I admire your courage in saying it, but I don't think that's your stance. So I need you to go find me somewhere in the New Testament that lists out what is sexual immorality, and one that can be honest and consistent with. And again, I recognize that this is an unfair tactic I'm using, because no one within the sound of my voice, there are men out there right now currently having sex with sheep at this very moment who would not claim that having sex with sheep is allowed in the New Testament. You're just not going to find any, even the worst practitioners of bestiality are not going to tell you that it's allowed in the New Testament. Okay, and so now you have to find me a comprehensive list of sexual immorality in the New Testament. And it's going to have to include incest, and it's going to have to include bestiality, and you can't. It's not there. I have torn it apart looking for it. I have talked to learned men with PhDs in biblical You must have been on the res before. I guess a reservation. Men with PhDs in Greek and Hebrew. I have a friend who he reads the New Testament in Greek and he reads the Old Testament in Hebrew. And he's, I mean, for real, he's got, I mean, he has a doctorate. He's not just like one of these guys who fakes it. He literally knows this stuff. And he's not the only one who I know like that. That list is not in the New Testament. Acts 15 has to be pornea, the list of prohibited sexual acts has to be referring to the Old Testament sexual laws. There's just no other option. If it's not, then we have a very, very, very perverse faith. One that allows things that none of us would ever countenance. I know we got off on all of that on a little bit of a tangent there. But yes, we live in a New Testament world. Yes, some things from the Old Testament are no longer in effect. We don't have sacrifices anymore. We don't have a priesthood anymore. I've just been reading in Hebrews and Galatians recently, which I go through Hebrews and Galatians periodically because I am a Torah keeper and because every road has two ditches. And Torah keepers are prone to certain kinds of errors and even heresies that if we don't stay grounded in the New Testament, we will fall into. And Torah keepers are very, 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 very lax about our New Testament. We are in danger of extreme error in the Torah keeping community right now. We're in extreme danger. We have the ability, we have the potential. I believe God has risen up Torah keeping at this time to it would have been much easier if it had just said it that way, vulgar. To be a type of reformation, to sort of lead a return to a certain type of sola scriptura. But we are being seduced by Jewish fables. And I love the Jews. I'm not a Jew hater. You know, I believe the Jews are who they claim to be. I believe they received blessings. The blessings of Abraham and David still fall to the Jews. I will always bless the Jews. I will never curse the Jews. But they do deny Christ, and they do have some extreme errors that of necessity have had to be adopted over the last 2,000 years to justify their faith, because they can't practice their faith the way it was given to them. And if we as Torah keepers are going to take on these aspects of Judaism that postdate Christ and don't deal with the reality that there is no way for us to receive propitiation for sins outside of a New Testament, the sacrifices and the priesthood had to have passed away. They had to have been fulfilled. So there's that verse that says, Jesus says this. This is a quote from Christ. And again, I'm paraphrasing. I don't have the text in front of me, so please show me some grace here if I get it wrong. He says something along the lines, I have not come to do away with the law and the prophets. Yea, not one jot or tittle will pass away until it all be fulfilled. I believe very strongly that is an individual, that not one individual aspect will pass away until that particular aspect has been fulfilled. So the priesthood and the temple or the tabernacle and the sacrifices, those individual things have been fulfilled. Those things have passed away. You have to show me where something has been fulfilled before I will allow that it has passed away. Now, that gets a little complex, and I don't want to get into all that right now. Because there's a lot of things that we as Torah keepers say are laws that were never laws. We have a lot of our own traditions in the Torah keeping community that we are not being honest with ourselves about. Uh, and I, I really think that if the Torah movement is going to continue, that we're going to have to be honest with ourselves, and we're going to have to start rooting out a lot of those falsehoods. Uh, we can't have a New Testament faith and believe that everyone has to keep all of the laws of Moses. No, it's not. It's not possible for us to keep all of the laws of Moses, and it's not even advisable for us to keep all of the laws of Moses, because, like I just said, the sacrifices and the tabernacle and the Levitical priesthood were the laws of Moses. You know, if we honestly believe that we're still beholden to all the laws of Moses, then we all need to be out killing and skinning badgers so that we can cover a tabernacle with badger skins, because that was the law of Moses. And God even says, be careful to not deviate one iota from the description he gave of the tabernacle. Go read it again. He says, make the tabernacle exactly this way. It was a positive command. And it included covering it with badger skins. All right? If we really, really believe that every single aspect of the Mosaic law is still in effect, then we all need to be out skinning badgers. And none of us are. And none of us are advocating for it. And we get some really stupid excuses. Badger stock going up. We get some really stupid excuses as to why. Well, we can't anymore. Well, bullshit. Bullshit. You can skin badgers all day long, young man. Don't tell me you can't skin no badgers. Don't tell me that we can't build a tabernacle, that it's beyond us. It is not. All right? We don't do these things because they're too hard. And we don't do these things because they're not required anymore. It's not required for us to have a tabernacle anymore. The tabernacle was fulfilled. It's not required for us to have sacrifices anymore. The sacrifices were fulfilled. But even if you reject that, even if you say that no, they weren't fulfilled, then I need to see you building a tabernacle. So we don't need no stinking badgers. Anywho. Yeah, right. It would. Yeah, the badger skins would be the easy part. But the point stands. Why aren't we doing it? If it's required for us to keep all of the Mosaic law, then by God, let's go keep the Mosaic law. Building a tabernacle was part of the Mosaic law, and the fact that there's no priesthood to staff that tabernacle is not our problem. We were commanded quite expressly and explicitly to build that tabernacle. It's God's problem to staff it. And let me be clear, I don't believe we should be building a tabernacle. I'm not saying we should. I'm saying if you believe that not any aspect of the law can pass away until all of the entirety of the law will pass away, then I need to see you building a tabernacle. And until I do, I don't have much use for what you're saying. And I know that's a complete aside. I'm talking to Torah keepers. That had nothing to do with my conversation with Mark. And let me reiterate that the standards for fellowship in the ecclesia, in the assembly, in the so-called church, remember church is an English word, is confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, abstain from food sacrificed to idols, don't eat blood, and abstain from sexual immorality. If you do those things, I am required by Acts chapter 15 to accept you as a Christian brother. And yes, I'm perfectly okay with that word Christian. This is something else I think we in the Torah community are batshit crazy about. There is nothing wrong with the word Christian. I hear this all the time. Jesus never said he was going to institute a new religion called Christianity. Yeah, stop it. It's a word. It's a word that describes a category of people. And it's an English word. Jesus never said you were allowed to speak English either. He also said you were never required to speak Hebrew. All Christianity means is people who try to make themselves like Christ. It's ridiculous to get wrapped up around the axle about the word Christian. Anyway. Yeah, Stephen, I like that. I use the phrase Torah observant Christian. I think kosher Christian's not a bad alternative either. And just for my Torah keeping friends who are still with us, let me brag a little bit. I keep Torah. You know, I keep a seventh day Sabbath. Our Sabbath starts sundown on Friday and runs to sundown on Saturday. That is being questioned in our community, by the way, which I find incredibly ironic. I do eat clean. I keep the feast. I keep Passover the way I believe it's commanded to be kept in Exodus, where the first Passover is. There's two different ways to keep Passover in the Old Testament. There's the original Passover that we're told is a statute for all times, forever in all of our dwellings. I have a theory about this, Stephen, and let me talk to you about it in just a second. Then later on, and that Passover, we're told to keep it in our homes. Later on, as the children are going, the Hebrew children are going into the land, they're told they have to keep the Passover in the place where God will choose to put his name. I believe that's a specific command to physical Israelites who have an inheritance in the land and are living in the land. I don't believe that applies to the rest of us. I believe the rest of us who are Torah keepers should be keeping Passover the way the original Passover was kept. Now, there's some arguments against that. I don't think they're correct, but they're at least honest. And you know, if everyone wants to talk about that, we can talk about that. It starts getting to be a little bit inside baseball, though. But I keep Passover that way. So on the 10th of Nisan or the 10th of Aviv, we go and pick a lamb out of a flock. We bring it back to the house. We keep it near the house for 4 days. Towards the evening on the 14th of Aviv, we slaughter the lamb without breaking any of its bones. We roast it whole over a fire, and we eat it all that night, just the way it's all described in Exodus. I keep that Passover the way it's described. We keep all the feasts the way they're described. The only tradition I keep, is it Genesis? I'm sorry if I got that wrong. I was thinking it was Exodus chapter 12 for some reason. The only tradition I keep is the Day of Atonement. I keep the traditional fast where I don't eat or drink for 24 hours. That's actually not in the text. But I think that's actually a decent tradition. You know, the text says that on the Day of Atonement we're to afflict our flesh or afflict our souls. And that's the best way I've found so far to do that. That's like the only tradition I adhere to. And so and that's not one I require, that I think can be required. I don't even require it in my home. On the Day of Atonement, my children drink water and eat peanut butter bread. So they do a type of fast, but they don't do a full fast. And when my wife is pregnant or nursing, she does something similar. She does the same thing. She drinks water and she can have peanut butter and bread, which is still a fast, and it's still afflicting your flesh. You should hear how those kids bitch and moan about that. But I do the tradition. Except I will allow, because we don't have air conditioning, so I leave open the potential if we're ever in a heat wave that I might at some point in the future, drink water on that day if it's a really hot day. But it would be limited. I wouldn't just like tell myself I could drink as much as I wanted. I would look at the weather report or the weather, whatever the hell that thing is, and say, okay, it's going to be this hot. I'll allow myself a glass of water at this time. So Stephen was talking about, where did Sunday come from? And we got to remember what we're commanded to do on the Sabbath, and what we're not we're not commanded to gather together on the Sabbath. There is no indication in the text that there was any kind of corporate worship connected to Sabbath. It's all about rest, and it's all about not working. So you could go to church every day of the week but Saturday and still be in obedience to the Sabbath, the Sabbath laws, because the Sabbath laws are to do no servile work, to not kindle a fire, and you can't. There's like a bunch of categories of work you can't do, but you actually can do exercise. It's not about exercise. The work, as far as I can understand it, the work that is, and I'm very open to being proven wrong on this. I'm in evolution on all this stuff myself. But my understanding right now is that the work that is forbidden is any kind of work that has a future benefit, or any kind of work that's providing for your physical needs. I can't. So we see Jesus and the disciples. They're walking through the fields and they're picking heads of grain and they're eating the heads of grain. And obviously, if Jesus is doing it, it's lawful. But had they kept one of those heads of grain to eat later, I think that would have been a violation of the Sabbath. That's my understanding right now, that none of the things you do on the Sabbath can be providing for future wants or needs. But you can definitely be caring for immediate needs. That's just my understanding at the moment. But I'm sorry. So where did Sunday come from? So there's no command to gather on the Sabbath. So you could go to Sunday church, and if you're keeping the Sabbath laws, there's nothing wrong with that. And Torah keepers, we have to be honest with ourselves, because we get all wrapped around the axle about Sunday church, but we don't have any problem at all with the Wednesday night prayer service. Well, if Sunday church is forbidden, why isn't a Wednesday night prayer meeting forbidden? It would be, or it's not. Neither is wrong. So I think how it started is that Saturday was kept as a traditional Sabbath, a day of rest. And then, because we're commanded to forsake not the gathering together unto yourselves, the early believers, who were all, not all, but were heavily influenced by Judaism, they would then meet, they would keep the Saturday Sabbath, and then they would have their gathering on Sundays. And I think that's just where our 2-day weekend in the West comes from. I think it actually is an echo of Sabbath keeping, real Sabbath keeping. Just over time, we lost all of the actual commands around our day of rest on Saturday, and we made it. So yeah, no, the house of God is not commanded, vulgar, but the gathering together is a very, very strong teaching. I believe it's Paul. I don't remember for sure. But he says, forsake not the gathering together unto each other. We are to gather with other followers of Christ. I don't think we can neglect that and uh, persist long in the day in our faith. And Mark just said something very, very true. So there is a biblically commanded festival that's not well understood, that I don't understand at all, called first fruits. And it is tied to Sunday. It is tied to the day after the Sabbath. There may be something to that, where Sunday worship has some basis in the first fruits. We also call this day the day of Pentecost. I find that unconvincing. That may be a little bit of backwardation, looking backwards and trying to fill in, try to find an explanation after the fact. But I don't know that for sure. So that's where I think Sunday probably came from. It probably had its roots in something positive, or at least something. Anyway. That being said, we do meet with a messianic. I don't like the term messianic, and I don't think that accurately describes me. But we do meet with a messianic group on Saturdays. I actually would prefer a Friday night assembly. I think that would be more in keeping with a restful, stress-free Sabbath. The way our assembly does it is we meet at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I actually think it interferes with the Sabbath a little bit, but not so much that I'm willing to not gather together with other like-minded believers. Oh man, we got far afield tonight, didn't we? But I kept my cigar going for most of the night. Of course, it required me to smear my face with soot. Mark, brother, I hope we're still on a firm footing. Yeah, Stephen, we were without a group for a long time, and we were trying to do a home church, and it just wasn't working. I wasn't being diligent about it. We are celebrating the election. And you know what, Mark? As a good Catholic, we can both celebrate the pro-life victories that we have seen in recent years. That is certainly a battle Catholics have fought side by side with other believers on, that we can all celebrate. My God, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Yeah, I saw that, Jason. I thought that was awesome. What do I think about a dress code for church? Okay, so again, because I reject all traditions. Yeah, we do have. Yeah, Mark, the pro-life movement. We're the dog that caught the car. I'm not the first one to say that either. And we'd have to figure out what we're doing. We know what we believe. We know who we are. We don't have to redefine ourselves. We do have to figure out what our strategy is going forward. For 50 years, we had a single-minded focus on Roe versus Wade. And that was right, and that was good. Now we have to figure out, and I don't think we should have one focus. I don't think the pro-life movement has to be just one thing anymore. I'm an abolitionist when it comes to abortion. Hey, Christopher's still with us. Christopher Cunningham, you said something at one point that I meant to follow up with, and I think I failed to do so. I apologize. If you remember what it was, put it back up. You know, we got like the Lila Rose. Yeah, I agree, Stephen. I think personhood is possibly the fight we need to go for. But I think again, I don't think there just has to be one aspect of this. I am very, very concerned that we're seeing traditionally pro-life states codify abortion in state law. I am personally of the opinion that right now our main goal should be reducing the number of abortions. And I don't know that pursuing statewide bans at this exact moment, or even a nationwide ban at this exact moment, is not going to end up causing more abortions to happen by allowing pro-abortion laws to get codified on the books. For a little while, I think while the emotions are so high, we might need, like Stephen just said, we might need to focus on cultural change rather than, and I know how that sounds, and I hate the sound of that too. We have to personally, as individuals, take firm, uncompromising pro-life stances. And then we have to figure out, we can't be a movement of the useless gesture. You know, that's what liberals do. You know, the useless gesture, the impotent gesture. I never, ever, ever, ever want to say, well, you know, I made a useless gesture and it ended up getting abortion codified in law, but, you know, my conscience is clear because I made a useless gesture. I want to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. And if the policies we chase make abortion more prevalent or more secure, then we have not been wise as serpents, and we certainly haven't been harmless as doves. So that's why, like Lila Rose, many of you may not know who she is, but she's an absolutely uncompromising pro-life advocate, which I admire her personal stance. I don't know that she's being effective at reducing abortions or in the long-term fight in making abortion less prevalent in our society. Not that I would ever accuse her of promoting abortion. Her heart's 100% in the right place, but I don't think at the moment she's effectively combating abortion. I think she's being I think she's being more effective at securing abortion for the wrong side at the moment. But I'm not familiar with Abolitionist Rising, Stephen. I'll have to look into them. All right, man. I think we might call this one. Cigar's getting to the point where it's down pretty low. My firewood's run out. My voice might be getting a little sore. We might be about to call this one. Anybody got anything we want to talk about on the way out? Oh, dress code. Thank you, Stephen. I'm so sorry. So, I don't accept any man-made traditions, right? Or any man-made rules as spiritually binding. I'll be interested in your thoughts. So we do know that we're commanded to modesty. But that's not defined for us. So I believe that every assembly and every family has freedom to set a dress code. And if an assembly sets a dress code, the members who want to be in good standing in that particular assembly need to adhere to that dress code. And I believe that the elders of that assembly have a right and even a spiritual obligation to enforce that dress code inside that assembly. However, this is why elders have such a high standard for who gets to be elders. They have to realize, they have to acknowledge that those standards are being set by them. These are not standards that God set himself. And if we get dogmatic about a dress code to the point, okay, let me say this. The dress code, if you're going to enforce a dress code, the dress code should be enforced on the members of good standing of that assembly. If some whore walks in off the street naked, hey, good night, Mark Ottinger, and that assembly tries to enforce their dress code on her, I think they're in severe error. The only people who that dress code should be enforced on are those members who have submitted themselves to that assembly. And if you try to enforce your dress code on anyone else, then I think, obviously, vulgar. If she needs clothes, we're commanded to clothe the naked. That's actually an act, but I don't think that's not necessarily if a whore walks in purposely naked by free choice, and then we tell her, oh no, you're too sinful to be in our church. Well, how the hell are you going to tell someone they're too sinful to hear the preaching of the gospel? Fuck you and get the hell out of my face. Now, obviously, if there was some naked woman sitting next to my 12-year-old son, that's going to be a much more complex I'm not, but yes, okay. So I have a dress code it's not I shouldn't say dress code. That's going a little too far. I have standards of modesty in my house. Now, I actually don't have to enforce them because my wife has a personally stricter code for herself and our daughters than I have. And then it's not that I have a very loose code at all. It's just that I have a very modest wife. I have a pretty admirable wife in most ways. I don't want to give her too much credit. Starts getting the big head and all that. You got to keep them oppressed. But I have never once seen my wife in anything that would give me pause for her to be in public. The only thing I put on her that maybe wouldn't always be 100% her choice as far as dress code go is that I ask her to cover her hair when she's in public without me, just as a sign of her being covered. And I think that's a principle I can show in Scripture, but it's definitely not a command. I think it's just a principle. And so I think there's times when, and she's pretty open to that. She doesn't kick against it at all. I think there's times when that wouldn't necessarily be her first natural choice. But that's a standard I feel pretty strong about. And then, of course, I do think it's a firm teaching that women are to cover their heads it's shameful for a woman to pray or prophesy uncovered. And I interpret that to mean any sort of spiritual, certainly prayer, but any kind of spiritual moment. So if there's prayer going on, she'll cover her head. If she doesn't have something nearby to cover her head with, I'll put my hand on her head and just be a literal physical covering in that moment. But she's usually got something nearby that she can kind of just discreetly and quietly flip up and be covered for that moment of prayer. I hadn't never really thought about like praise and worship before. I might need to think about that. I might need to ask her what she does during praise and worship. I might not have even noticed. She might be ahead of me on that. But modesty applies to men too, We don't need to be wearing, women don't have the visual responses that we as men do. But in our culture today, as men, we got to be thinking about other men lusting after us too. We don't need to be wearing, tight pants with our junk highlighted and, you know, hyper tight t-shirts designed to show off our muscles. Uh, yeah, Mark, that's something that I would definitely, especially the trad Catholics, I would I would definitely agree with them on. Their women, traditional Catholic women cover their head during the mass uh, and prayer. I don't know if they cover their heads anytime they're in the church building or not. I'm not that familiar with Catholic teaching, but that's definitely an area where I would agree with traditional Catholicism. And by the way, traditional Christianity, period, Protestant and Catholicism, up through the 1960s. My mom will talk about how when she was a girl, and she's 69. Uh, when she was a girl, all women wore hats and covered their hair, especially at church. But almost any time in public, you and there were whole industries of women's hats. But anyway, so that's my take on uh, on modesty. I don't like to say that anything is situational, but modesty really is situational. If you're in a nudist camp, a Speedo is modest, technically. I think people should be able to look at us and say, those people are different. And I think clothing is a really good way to do that. That's why modesty is a teaching of the church. One of the ways I try to have modesty in my personal dress is that I dress simply. Uh, so I have a small amount of clothes, uh, and they're not flashy clothes. I do have some button-up shirts, so it's like some dress shirts, uh, and I try to have a good pair of blue jeans so that I can put on. And I wear cowboy boots. I have them on right now because we were at assembly today. So I've got like a pair of dress shoes, my cowboy boots, and I try to have a nice pair of jeans, and then a nicer shirt. And then the rest of my life, I try to dress. I almost dress slovenly. I wear work pants and work shirts. I try not to wear any logos or anything that's recognizable as being a designer clothes. I try to dress what I would describe as plainly. Yes, Rob, I wear a dress. It's a pretty dress. I look pretty in it. It matches my beard. Lots of browns, and increasingly these days gray. Uh, well, I feel like we were just about to wrap up, Rob, but I feel like if you just got here, we should keep going. But no, I've run out of steam. We've gone for 2.5 hours. Oh yeah, now I will, Mark. I used to own a tuxedo. That picture of me in the tuxedo was a tuxedo I owned. Because I used to do in between my marriages, I would do a lot of ballroom dancing, and so I had a tuxedo that I would wear to balls and stuff to go dancing in. So yeah, I'm a little bit of a peacock naturally. Uh, Plain and simple is. I could definitely, if I indulged my baser instincts, I like a little bit of attention. So yeah, that's well, when I was in the military, yeah, I would uh I the so the tuxedo was for social balls. When I would go to the military balls back when I was in the military, I wore my uniform at the time. Uh which ooh, that dress blue uniform, man, I got to tell you. For a man who tries to dress simple, that is a gaudy uniform. Uh, I used to love getting dressed up in my dress blues. So the last time I wore that tuxedo, when was the last time I know I wore that tuxedo at our wedding. And in fact, that picture that you're talking about was, if you're talking about the picture, I'm thinking you're thinking about that's up on our Facebook page. I have a Facebook page. I don't do much with it, but uh, there is a Revolting Man Facebook page, and the profile picture on that is what I think Mark is talking about. Oh no, you know what? Oh no, Mark, we put a video up one time of me dancing at a performance. It wasn't a ball. It was a symphony performance, and I wore that tuxedo. That may have been the last time I wore that tuxedo. Actually, I don't have it anymore. I finally got rid of it, and I think that was the last time I wore that tuxedo. No, I think I wore it uh, for my brother's wedding too. So it might have been my brother's wedding was the last time I wore it. But I had a different coat. He wanted all the men in the wedding party to wear a white dinner jacket. So I wore the tuxedo pants, the shirt, the vest, uh, and then I had a white dinner jacket that time. It was kind of James Bondy. I didn't like it though. It didn't. I just liked the classic black. Um, but it was his wedding, so I mean. But I'll also tell you this: that tuxedo cost $100, like $120, because I went down to the Burlington Coat Factory. I needed a tuxedo for some dances, and I went down to the Burlington Coat Factory and I bought the cheapest tuxedo I could find. It was, like I said, it was about 120 bucks, and I just wore the crap out of it. I mean, multiple balls a year, multiple performances. Uh, for about 5 years, I was probably wearing that tuxedo 4 or 5 times a year. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Uh, the ukulele is progressing, Vulgar. Uh, I don't have any latent musical ability, but I'm trying to practice, and it is progressing. I've probably gone almost as far as I can go by myself. I probably never worn a tuxedo. It's fun. Tuxedos are fun. I probably need to start watching some tutorial videos and trying to to learn some stuff. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Vulgar. It's really been meaningful to me. Well, Steven's only got 2 suits now, and they are exactly the same. That sounds like a uniform. I tell you, in the Marines, I loved the dress blue uniform. But I loved all the uniforms, and we had one that I really liked that was called Service. I think it was called Service Charlies. So in the Marine Corps, you got the dress uniforms, which for most enlisted men is just the dress blues. There's no variation on that. Officers had a variation on dress uniforms, but then you had your service uniforms, and they weren't khaki, they weren't camis. They were sort of the classic green pants and beige shirt. But so the green pants and the short sleeve, Stephen, was the service Bravos, if I remember correctly. No, I don't remember now. So I think you're right. I think the service Charlies was the short sleeve shirt, and the service Bravos was the green pants and a long sleeve khaki shirt with a tie. Uh, and then you wore the piss cover. Or I think you could wear either the piss cover or the barracks cover. Okay, so the Bravos. I really liked the service Bravos. That was probably my favorite uniform after the dress blues uniform. Yeah, I didn't like it with the sweater. But yeah, I really liked the long sleeve with the tie, and we had the tie tack, and I would wear the shirt stays. We had these elastic bands we would run from the bottom of your shirt down to the top of your socks. Uh, oh, okay, then it was the piss cover. The barracks cover was only for the alphas. Uh, I really loved that uniform, and I wore it every chance I got. So I saved the dress blues for like the ball, shirt stays. That's what they were called. So I would keep the dress blues for like the ball, the Marine Corps ball, or for weddings, or for really kind of formal affairs. And if anything needed, a dressy uniform, then I would go for the Bravos. Oh, I never had any of the Creighton shirts. Those were nice. I always just had the cheap, polyester shirts. Uh, yeah, the Creighton shirts looked really good. And enlisted men were not allowed to tailor their shirts, so I never got mine tailored. But I knew some enlisted guys who did get those long sleeve shirts tailored, and yeah, they were pretty good, pretty hot uniform. Not in that sexual way, Rob. Uh, I liked that, Stephen. I think I do not like this. We wear camis for everything stuff anymore. Uh, Now I was in the infantry, and so we were frequently not in places where we could wear the service uniform. But I think like office workers, and I think the cami should be saved for the field environment, for the training environment, for barracks duty, that type stuff. I think anytime that there's a public face, we should be in the service uniform. Uh, you know what? I like that too. We wore camis on barracks duty, but I agree we should wear a service uniform on barracks duty. I agree. All right, man. I do have to shut this down. My voice is going, and I need to go get something to drink, and I've got a huge day ahead of me tomorrow. I had to work Friday, so I didn't get anything done around here. And Mariah wants me to move the stove and the refrigerator back inside since the weather's cooling down in the summer. Don't get out of here with that raw shit. The young men, young men. Uh, so I have to try to. Rob, I'm sorry we missed you too, brother. You would have definitely enjoyed our conversation this evening. We went far, far, far afield. Far afield. But anyway, so I've got to run a gas line tomorrow, and I got to move the stove and the refrigerator, and I've got more to get. And I really need to be cutting firewood. Uh, and I've got this silly book I'm trying to write, and I'd like to try to get some work done on it tomorrow too. So I'm going to be trying to stuff a whole lot of, what's the old saying? Trying to put 10 pounds of poop in a 5-pound bag. I'm going to be trying to do that tomorrow, so I need to start moving in a direction. Men, we appreciate you. Thank you. Y'all have a good evening. Stephen, thank you for the good conversation. Mark, thank you for the good conversation. Rob, thank you for the good conversation we could have had you been here. Yeah, I'm trying to write a book, Rob. It's actually going better than I thought. I might have some updates on that for y'all if you're interested in it. We can talk about it. Or text me. I'll text you and tell you a little bit about it, Rob. I'm always I'm kind of enjoying the process. All right, man. We appreciate you. Have a good night.